Hi, it's Steve Hargadon, and we've got just about a day left in our 5th annual Global Education Conference. This has been a terrific event, and we're lucky to have Vicky Colbert here with us. Vicky, welcome.
Thank you very much, Steve.
Thanks to our conference sponsors and supporters, especially to Iron USA and the Global Campaign for Education, and the rest of these terrific organizations who make this conference possible and allow it to be a free event. This is a chance for those of you who are in the live audience to indicate where you're participating from. Look to the left of the map. You're looking for the star icon. Double-click on that and then click on the map. Do put a shout-out in the chat as well. Time, temperature, location. Govinda's in the room, so I know we're going to get Nepal. Maisie's in the room, so I know we're going to get Israel. Connecticut, Chicago. Honduras. Mexico, Canada, it looks like. So keep those notes coming in the chat. We're going to move forward here as I introduce Vicky.
Okay.
Vicky Colbert is founder and director of Fundación Escuela Nueva and co-author of the Escuela Nueva educational model, worldwide known for its proven effectiveness in improving the quality of education. She has developed, expanded, and sustained this innovation from different organizational spheres as the first Escuela Nueva National Coordinator, Director of Distance Education in Javeriana University, Vice Minister of Education of Colombia, UNICEF's Regional Education Advisor for the LAC region, and now from Fundación Escuela Nueva, a nonprofit she founded in 1987 to ensure the quality and sustainability of the Escuela Nueva model in Colombia and abroad, and to further adapt its proven cutting-edge pedagogy to new contexts and populations. Vicky, thank you for being here.
I'm so happy to be with you, Steve. Thank you so much.
So the time is yours. Do you know how to move the slides forward?
Perfect. Well, first of all, before I start, I just want to share with all of you that Escuela Nueva, which means new school in Spanish, I think it's one of the longest running bottom-up innovations of the developing world that's still being sustained, because usually innovations fade within bureaucracies. And Escuela Nueva started as a local innovation. It gradually became a national policy in Colombia, impacting more than 20,000 schools. And then once the World Bank selected it as one of the 3 innovations that had successfully impacted national policies, many countries, especially from the Latin American region, came to be inspired in this experience of Colombia. We initially started in the rural areas, and this has been expanded to many other countries, mainly through governments. Most recently, it has become a national policy also in Vietnam. And also just recently we came from Zambia, where we're going to start working jointly with CAMTED and Cotton, who just recently received the WISE Prize also. So I wanted to share this long story because also to share with all of you that it became a national policy through government. But once we reached so many schools, once I left the ministry, I had to create an NGO, Fundación Escuela Nueva. Fundación in Spanish, it's a nonprofit organization. It's not a foundation, a corporate foundation. It's a nonprofit.
Vicky, this is Steve.
Because
your
Steve?
Your audio is going in and out a little. I don't know if you're holding a microphone or if it's one on a headset, but if you could make sure the microphone is positioned, we're hearing you go in and out just a little.
Do you hear it better now? Do you hear it? Is it okay right now?
It actually, yes. Lucy says yes.
Okay.
So keep going.
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay, so I can continue. So what I wanted to share with all of you is that I'm going to be speaking about what Escuela Nueva is, but I wanted to share with you also that it's the process of how we introduce change in a country. Once it became a national policy, then Colombia became decentralized, and there was a huge challenge now of working with all the local governments. So when we had put in place at the end of the 80s, reaching so many schools.
Vicky, we're having a hard time hearing you again. Did something change? Did something change, or was?
No, I'm holding it exactly the same as I did before. Try again. Is everything okay? You hear me?
Okay, now you're speaking quite nicely, or the sound is coming through clearly. But you might want to repeat the last couple of sentences. It was hard to hear.
Yes. Yes, what I wanted to share with all of you is that it's one of the longest running bottom-up innovations. Why? Because once it became a national policy, then I had to create an NGO from a nonprofit organization, Fundación Escuela Nueva, from civil society, to sustain it, to maintain the quality, to continue innovating, because usually innovations fade within government bureaucracies. So what we have learned after more than 30 years, and we have to work with governments to have big impact and coverage, but we need civil society and public-private partnerships for sustaining it and for quality development. So this was just an overall introduction I wanted to make. Now I want to, now I'm going to start. Escuela Nueva, as I said, means new school. And we want to emphasize 3 key words: quality education, because it has demonstrated improvements in quality, but also, most recently, because of the strong social skills we develop, it has an impact on peace and democracy. Okay, so let me get started right now. Perfect. So I want to share with you some 5 takeaways that we have learned over so many years. The first one is, yes, it is possible to improve the quality of education and learning in the poorest of the poorest schools, of low-income schools in developing countries. Yes, we can do it. The second one is, however, more of the same is not enough. Just expanding current educational systems is not enough. It requires a paradigm shift. And this is exactly what Escuela Nueva did, a massive paradigm shift in pedagogy. Third, we had to think systemically from the beginning. So any innovation, if you want to have large-scale impact, you have to think systemically. Fourth, learning has to go beyond just academic achievements, fostering social emotional competencies. 21st century skills are crucial. The social skills are crucial for quality and peaceful democratic behaviors. And fifth, it's important. Technology is crucial. It's very important because it triggers change. But you need a new pedagogy in place. It's indispensable for effective learning, and especially for the introduction of new technologies. Just introducing technologies without changing your pedagogy, the only thing will happen is that you perpetuate a traditional scheme at a higher cost. So we have to be very strong about talking about a new type of pedagogy, which is nothing new in the philosophy of education. We know the theory for more than 150 years, but most of these theories of active learning came to elite schools in the Latin American region, not to the poorest of the poor schools. Okay, with these 5 takeaways, I will start with this quote. For more than 100 years, the lack of school management methods has been the cause of countless complaints. But it has been only in the last 30 years that efforts have been made to find a solution to this problem. And what has resulted? Schools continue exactly the same as before. Who said this? Comenius in the year 1632. With this quote that I find so important, that I want to share with you, is that I want to highlight that everything has changed except the way of learning, despite that we know the theory. And most of these ideas are not new. but it's just that they have to come mainly to the elite schools, at least in the Latin American region. So my main message here is most educational reforms have been administrative in nature, and pedagogy has not been touched as we would like to be highlighted, because it's something that any teacher can do in their classroom. So this is why I want to focus and emphasize the importance of a new type of pedagogy. Okay, so let's say when I came back from my studies, I myself had the opportunity to have good quality education, both in my basic education and also in higher education. I returned from my studies in Stanford, and I'm originally a sociologist. So for us, inequality is crucial, and totally, without quality basic education, nothing can be achieved in a country. No results, no academic achievement, no peace, no democracy. So when I came, the first thing that Colombia was facing, the first problem that Colombia was facing, was Colombia did not offer complete primary education. And unfortunately, most other countries in the region had the same challenge. So what did we find in the Latin American region? No results, very low academic achievements, incomplete schooling, high repetition and dropout rates, low self-esteem of children, rigid calendars and evaluation and promotion systems, traditional frontal teacher-centered methods, a lot of memorization, not comprehension, very weak school-community relationships, overloaded, irrelevant curriculums, insufficient time for effective learning, like 3 hours a day, 100 days, compared to 6 hours, 220 days in Europe or in the United States. So just facing this issue, we're not offering, the same rights to the children in the low-income schools. Untrained teachers in handling multi-grade schools. I want to focus on this word because this is where we started. Because most of these schools are invisible schools to most educational planners. So we started working in the multi-grade schools because they forced us to think about rethinking everything because nothing worked. Teacher training was highly ineffective, inadequate pre- and service training of teachers. Most faculties of education and teachers' colleges in the Latin American region are very philosophical, theoretical, and they give conferences of participatory learning. So this is crucial because this is where one of the main problems and the main issues is. Limited amount of time in the first grades to learning basic skills, and lack of appropriate learning materials for children. So nothing worked in these schools. Everything, education systems were like failed companies. Nothing worked. So this really forced us to think systemically and to think in a very comprehensive, systemic approach. So this is why we had to focus on the learner, on the child. We had to think systemically about curriculum. Escuela Nueva, it has an intervention in the curriculum level, at the classroom level, in the way teachers are trained, teacher training strategies, in the school and community relationships, because we incorporate the parents in a very active way, and of course the administrative issues. So all these 4 integrated components of Escuela Nueva have an impact on national curriculum policies, on national training policies, and on national textbook policies. So I just wanted to highlight why we had to start thinking systemically. If we wanted to have changes at the level of the child, if we wanted a more active participatory child, we also have to think of how to make changes in the way of training the teachers, how to go beyond just conferences and academic levels, how to bring the parents in the learning process in an easy way that anybody could do it, and also the administration of the schools. So, as I said at the beginning, being one of the longest running up innovations that's still being sustained, one of the first things we had to think was that anything we would do would be technically viable, that any teacher could do it, even in the jungle of Colombia, without having a PhD. Politically viable. We have very strong teachers unions in Latin America, so we had to really think that the teachers were the main actors of change, so that anything that we did the teachers were the actors of change. So it would be viable technically. Politically, if the teachers were against it, it would never become a national policy. And financially feasible from the outset, we always had to think of cost effectiveness. So this is crucial, because otherwise your impact can be very limited if you don't think about cost effectiveness. So we had to think of a paradigm shift. And since we started in the rural, isolated, multi-grade schools, this forced us to innovate. Angela Little from the University of London at the Institute of Education, she published in the year 2006 a book on how educational reforms worldwide will not reach the Millennium Goals unless we look into these multi-grade schools, which are very invisible to most educational planners. So we were forced to innovate. So we needed a paradigm shift, a pedagogical paradigm shift. It's just not expanding current educational systems. More of the same is not enough. So this implies a cultural change requiring a shift of emphasis from transmission of information to an emphasis in comprehension and collective construction of knowledge. Knowledge is constructed together. So a new approach to learning, renovated teaching methods, and the change in the role of the teacher was what we were forced to do 30 years ago. And by the way, these are the things everybody's talking about now. So we had to rethink everything because nothing worked. We had to rethink the classroom, the way of learning, and the education system. So what does Escuela Nueva do? I'm going to be sharing these visual images just so you can have an idea of what happens in the classrooms. Escuela Nueva transforms the conventional school and way of learning from frontal, teacher-centered instruction into really child-centered, active, participatory, cooperative learning. What does Escuela Nueva promote? First of all, what is Escuela Nueva? It's a basic education innovation. We started in basic education, developed in Colombia. It addresses all the critical factors I mentioned at the beginning, simultaneously, systemically, instead of tackling each variable in isolation. It integrates in a systemic and cost-effective curriculum, in-service training and follow-up, community and administrative strategies. It guarantees access, quality, and relevance, because through Escuela Nueva, the country offered complete primary education when it had not done before 30 years ago. And this happened the same with many other countries in the region where Escuela Nueva has been adapted. It started as a local innovation. It became a national policy implemented in most rural schools in Colombia at the end of the 80s, reaching more than 20,000 schools. What does it promote? Child-centered, which is nothing new in philosophy. We know the theory for 150 years. Child-centered, active, participatory, and cooperative learning. This is crucial for us. Different learning paces. Not everybody learns the same thing at the same time. This is an Escuela Nueva classroom. We have flexible promotion mechanisms that allow students to finish academic units at their own pace. So one of the first things we had to do was modularize the national curriculum so that we could adapt to the needs of children and their different learning rhythms and different learning paces. Relevance is crucial for quality education, that anything the child learns is significant and relevant on their daily life. A new role for the teacher, and we talked about this 30 years ago, and now this is what everybody's talking about. The new role of the teacher for the 21st century. We cannot continue having the role of a teacher as a transmitter of instruction, because instruction and content comes nowadays packaged in so many ways, especially with the media. So the role of the teacher is a new role as a facilitator, somebody that catalyzes, somebody that motivates, somebody that makes the intelligent questions for the higher level thinking skills, somebody that has more time to know their students, to know their problems, more personalized education, that has more time to work with the slow learners. So it's a new role of the teacher as a facilitator and orientator. We had to change the way of training the teachers. This, by the way, was in Uganda some years ago. Effective experiential teacher training methodologies. Because most Latin American teachers' colleges, teachers are trained through conferences and through theory, not through practice. So the first thing we have to do is that the teachers themselves experience the same methodology that they would be using with their students. Otherwise, how could they make the change? Teachers' microcenters or teacher learning circles. We cannot leave the teachers alone. Just like the students are working through cooperative learning, we had to make sure that teachers got together every month at least to share what they were doing, to share their problems, to share their innovations, so they could reflect on the way they were working with their children. So this is crucial. This is the initiation of a network and hopefully of a solid community, a learning community, where we are right now starting to work through our platform. We cannot leave teachers alone, and we know now that this is one of the most important issues in quality education, that teachers have a collective feeling of belonging to a team. A close relationship between school, family, and community. How could we bring the parents in the learning process without having so many PTA meetings, especially because children in remote areas, in low-income schools, parents are very poor and they don't have time for so many meetings. So we had to think of an easy way to bring the parents into the learning process without having so many meetings. We learned from John Dewey 90 years ago that democracy and participation is learned in the classroom. So we wanted to make sure that we emphasize nurturing democratic and participatory values and active citizenship through student government. But not only the traditional student government, the children have their committees. They take initiatives. They take responsibility. So this was crucial. They learned to participate. And by the way, girls' participation is really boosted. And we had to rethink and create a new concept, a new generation of self-paced, self-directed, reusable learning guides that incorporate both content and methodology and pedagogy, not only content. So something that was more flexible and personalized to promote independent learning and cooperative work simultaneously. So we had to, it was like, this is nothing new, but we had to sort of package in a different way what everybody traditionally has. A textbook, a workbook, and a guide for the teacher. So since we had to think of cost effectiveness, we had to incorporate the 3-in-1. Textbook, workbook, and the guide of the teacher all in one. So we went directly to the children that already know how to read, at least in second grade, that have some basic reading comprehension skills. We went directly to them, and the child forced the change in the classroom. So these learning guides, as we call them, promote individual work. They promote collaborative and group work because children are learning all the time through dialogue and interaction. These learning guides are dialoguing textbooks, where children are dialoguing all the time. I think this is a big difference. Children learn to work in pairs. They're always dialoguing and interacting among themselves, constructing knowledge together. Learning corners were what Maria Montessori talked about so many years ago, but we brought them alive in the learning environment of very low-income schools with very low cost-effective materials, because we have learned that children learn through concrete materials. So learning corners that improve learning environments. We had to develop instruments like a community map so that the school and community would come together and that children would perfectly identify where their houses are, so the teachers would know how far away they were from the school. So this was crucial because we developed a lot of instruments that promote participation. So Escuela Nueva is an innovative learning approach, as I said, not new in the philosophy, new in the way we made it a reality in any school, that enables youth to learn, to foster cognitive and social emotional competencies that are crucial for peace and democracy. There have been many, many evaluations because, as I mentioned, since it's one of the longest running bottom-up innovations that's still being sustained, evaluation and monitoring for Escuela Nueva has been crucial. So there have been many, many, many studies from the UNESCO, from the University of London, from Stanford University, from the World Bank, from national planning offices in Colombia, the National Planning Department, Conciencias, State Institute. So there have been many evaluations that have focused on Escuela Nueva. So I want to share with you some of the results. This is an old evaluation. Unfortunately, it's old because it was the first international comparative study of Latin America. And this was done by UNESCO, I think it was in the year 1999. It was published in the year 2000. But what is interesting is Colombia was around the middle average of education in Latin America. But then what was interesting about this first study is that rural education in Colombia outperformed urban education, except of the big cities in Latin America. So this showed us that we had results, and that Escuela Nueva compensated for low socioeconomic levels. And in mathematics, only Cuba was above us in Latin America at that time. So this was also crucial to demonstrate that rural schools outperform urban schools, except for the big megacities. So I wanted to share this study, which is old, but it's important because it was the first Latin American comparative international study. Now, in relation to the social skills, for us this is crucial. We demonstrated that cooperative learning initiates positive changes in democratic behavior. Skills, values, and attitudes of empathy and peaceful social interactions can be nurtured at school. And this is exactly what Escuela Nueva does. For example, these are studies that were done by Academy for Education Development in the U.S. in Guatemala, where the yellow lines are Escuela Nueva in Guatemala compared to the traditional schools. So there's children in the Escuela Nueva schools give positive feedback, contrary to negative feedback. They take turns. They learn to take turns. They learn to lead processes. So this is very crucial because for us, this was the study that was published by the University of London, that Escuela Nueva demonstrated significant results in the development of democratic behaviors and peaceful social interaction of children in comparison with conventional schools. Okay. The way we learn influences the development of our social interactions. So Escuela Nueva students gain awareness and understanding of the power of situations and groups to influence individual behavior. They develop skills to step up and act and become mindful change agents. They learn and practice the ability to overcome challenging situations, which are social, emotional, and academic. Escuela Nueva enhances girls' participation, self-esteem, and leadership skills. The Escuela Nueva pedagogy and methodology enhances girls' participation because of its active child-centered learning nature. Cooperative learning, which we know for so many years because of Johnson & Johnson studies, they contribute to eliminate prejudice, stereotypes, and gender biases. And it also provides opportunities for them to participate more, excel, be more outgoing, take initiative, and lead groups. Now, with this presentation, I shared with you some important evaluation results, but now I want to share with you something new. This is a newspaper of Colombia in the year 2003 that I think is interesting. Wanted, individuals who can work in teams. Do you have the ability to solve problems, follow instructions, lead processes, meet deadlines, but most important, work in groups? If the answer is yes, you have a greater chance of getting a job. And this is exactly what educational systems are not preparing students properly. The labor market and society in general needs individuals with these capacities and skills, but there are few of them because educational systems are not preparing students properly. The ability to solve problems, make decisions, live together peacefully, and learn to learn constitute the essential pattern of measurement to evaluate the efficacy of educational methodologies and performance in the labor market. So I wanted to highlight this because now this is what everybody's talking about, 21st century skills. So personalized and cooperative learning are essential for developing the 21st century skills. And these are the essence of Escuela Nueva. I just want to highlight a friend of mine, Francois Tadei. He's the head of the Interdisciplinary Research Center in Paris, because he's trying to also change French education at the higher education level. And he says, none of us alone is as smart as all of us together. I just wanted to highlight this because I want to emphasize the importance of cooperative learning. So the 21st century skills everybody's talking about. Learning to learn, learning to lead processes and take initiatives, learning to synthesize information, learning to collaborate, the ability to work in teams, critical thinking, which is taking on complex problems, follow instructions, meet deadlines, criticize and accept criticism and not use force, which is tolerance, test knowledge, communicate ideas using ICT, and to take risks. These are the 21st century skills that Escuela Nueva promotes. So I always say Escuela Nueva is like the story of Cinderella. It started with the poorest of the poor, and we ended up with cutting-edge pedagogics. I want to share with you a more comprehensive idea of 21st century skills and how Escuela Nueva unlocks the leadership and entrepreneurial skills required in the 21st century. The ways of thinking, learning to learn, creativity, innovation, critical thinking, problem solving, learning to synthesize information, how to live in the world, both local and global citizenship, learning to lead processes and take initiatives, to accept criticism and accept criticism positively, to take knowledge and take risks, the way of working now through communication. This conference is a wonderful example of a new way of working with new technologies. And of course, the tools for working, we need ICT literacy and information literacy. So Escuela Nueva has reached more than 5 million children around the world, mainly through governments, which is good and bad. And many countries, more than 35 countries, have visited Colombia to be inspired. As I mentioned, there have been many evaluations of the World Bank, one of the 3 most outstanding reforms in the developing world. The United Nations Development Report in the year 2000 selected Escuela Nueva as one of the 3 main achievements. It has an impact on girls' performance, how girls outperform their male classmates, and especially in the indigenous areas of Colombia. So I want to share with you now a bit information about the Fundación. It's our NGO, just to share with you why we had to create an NGO. Once this became a national policy, once we scaled up, then we had to learn to scale down. We said we cannot leave Escuela Nueva only in the hands of the governments, because innovations fade within bureaucracy. So I want to share with you why we had to create our nonprofit, because we wanted to extend the reach of the Escuela Nueva model. We wanted to assure the quality and its integrity and its implementation, and of course to update it and to continue meeting the global needs of the underserved. And our vision is that we want, by the 2018, we want to be a global technical reference for active, cooperative, and personalized learning based on the Escuela Nueva model. We want to lead a global movement to improve the lives of the underserved through our educational model centered on the learner. So we adapted it to urban areas. This is done by our NGO in 1987. We called it Escuela Activa Urbana. So we adapted it to urban areas. And this was in 1987. In 1988, we had a support from Inter-American Foundation. So we started not necessarily trying to impact national policy in the urban areas, as was in the rural areas. It was basically because the country became so decentralized, that every school principal has the autonomy to do what they want. So we had to start, our challenge was to work with the 1,000 local governments of Colombia, and we wanted to do it in the urban areas because there was a very rapid urbanization process in Colombia as in the rest of Latin America. The family and community relationships started to become deteriorated, and there was an increase in violence and delinquency. So this was crucial for us to get started in the urban areas. This was a study that National University did and showing just how the amazing improvement in language and math. A next innovation we did in Adaptation of Escuela Nueva was to Displaced-Migrant populations. We called it Escuela Nueva Learning Circles. Because of the armed conflict in Colombia, we started having many displaced families and children coming to the bigger cities, to the urban marginal areas of Bogota, for example, where these pictures have been taken. And these children need more love, more affection, more personalized attention. And in a huge, big school, they could not receive it. So they would drop out immediately. So we created these learning circles with a child-friendly environment at the community level. We wanted to transform the existing conventional schools to Escuela Nueva. But in this time, with this innovation, we wanted to bring youth community tutors to ensure sustainability, because there's a huge teacher turnover in the poorest of the poor schools and in the slums of Colombia. So we train a tutor, a youth community tutor, to work with 10 or 15 children in a multi-grade setting, and we called it at the community level. And these children would receive more attention so that they could enter the big school. And here we just want to share some studies of how these children in less than 1 year were beyond the national mean. So the learning circles are the wine color, and of course the yellow was where we were controlling our studies. And we wanted to have demonstration classrooms in the big school, but it was amazing that in the small learning circles, children went beyond the national mean. This was amazing. The second issue, and before I say that, before I go into the other issues, the social esteem, the self-esteem of children was enhanced, and this is crucial. And this for Escuela Nueva is one of the things that we've always had measurement. So that we have now new recent developments that our nonprofit is working on. Skills for the 21st century, the concept of how to work empathy and social skills through the learning process, how we can promote peace and democracy through the learning process, how we can promote entrepreneurship and financial education through the Escuela Nueva methodology, and starting to adapt not the whole model, but the methodology for adults, for women's education on entrepreneurship. We're incorporating digital resources to complement our printed materials, because we have to work with both. In very remote schools, where there are difficulties of connectivity, we have to have both, as everybody's talking about blended learning. And now, of course, because of the leadership skills that we have mentioned, this is an issue that we're working very, very much in. So we have a coalition of partners, and we want to promote an Escuela Nueva movement. It would be wonderful to work with all of you, with Steve and Lucy, to bring together many, many institutions from the academic world, from governments, from private sector, from international NGOs, because we did inspire a bit the child-friendly concept in UNICEF when I worked in UNICEF. So I just wanted to share with you this. We're working on a coalition of partners, and hopefully we will start promoting, we will be having a head of strategic partnerships in the U.S. next year. So you can get into Facebook, into Twitter, YouTube. We have more information. And Steve, I'm finalizing the presentation to leave time for questions if there are questions.
Thanks, Vicky. Yep, I'm here. I just had to switch windows.
Okay.
I'm going to go back to your main slide so people can see what you look like. If you have a question for Vicky, you can put it in the chat, or you can raise your virtual hand. That's the third icon over in the participant box. I caught one question that went by. This was from Jenny. Vicky, Jenny wants to know, do you believe that this could be the key to solving much of the same issues occurring in Mexico today?
Oh, definitely, definitely. I think Escuela Nueva is a proven solution to improve learning, not only, as I mentioned, in academic achievement, but in peaceful behavior. And many of the problems that Mexico is facing are the problems that Colombia was facing 10 years ago. So I do think that this type of interaction and of peaceful democratic behavior can be very much proposed in Mexico. And by the way, we are already working in Mexico, in Puebla, in the state of Puebla, and we made a partnership because this I learned after having expanded Escuela Nueva mainly through governments. You learn you have to work with governments, but it's not enough. So I had to bring into the picture, we had to bring into the picture public-private partnerships. TV Azteca is our partner in Mexico, and we're working together precisely to ensure quality and peaceful behavior in the state of Puebla.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you. Now I'm not hearing you.
I think that was something else. I'm not sure that was intended for us. Lucy, it seems like your microphone is on. I'm wondering if that's you, or it could be me. Hey, there were a couple of other questions. Vicky, how do you convince something work with the Ministries of Ed to accept this? How do you convince the Ministries of Education to accept this?
This is one of the toughest parts. Although we did start through government, it was 10 years starting through government, but for us, it was crucial to have a bottom-up strategy. We had to have demonstration schools demonstrating results. This is why in the United States, it was recently published last year by American Education Research Association, AERA, an article that I wrote on how to lead change at large scale, precisely because I was sharing how we had to start and why research and evaluation was crucial. So once we started having some demonstration schools at the regional level, then I started bringing the policy level people to see the schools, because you need visual images. In education, we need visual images to change attitudes and behaviors. If you do not have demonstration schools, teachers don't know where they're going. And also policymakers, because in Latin America there's so much philosophy and so much theory, but there are no results. So we had to demonstrate that there was results. And demonstrating, we always have had evaluation and monitoring behind anything we do in Escuela Nueva. So this was the way we started gradually bottom up to influence national policy. And then fortunately I became vice minister afterwards, after we started bottom up. So I gave it total support to universalize primary education in Colombia. And this was why it was such an important example for the other countries in the region. And most recently for the Vietnamese. We had some visits from the Vietnamese 3 years ago. They piloted Escuela Nueva with their technical assistance. And apparently they're so happy that they're going to take it to the whole country, both rural and urban. However, we do not control what governments do. So one of the things for us to ensure sustainability is to also have a partner from the private sector. But here in Colombia, we had the private sector. The Coffee Growers Federation was very important. And we had to create an NGO, a nonprofit, to continue innovating. Because yes, innovations fade within government bureaucracies.
Vicky, there were a couple of requests for your personal contact information. You don't necessarily have to give that out, but if you want to give out an email address or a Twitter account.
Anybody can, Steve, anybody can write to our webpage, www.escuelanueva.org. They can write and everything comes to me. I get a lot of direct information directly to me. So you can write to our webpage and everything reaches me.
Estelle wanted to know, what kind of education do you do with the parents?
With whom?
Sorry, with the parents. What kind of education do you do with the parents?
With the parents, in the learning, let's say, we have several moments where the parents participate. First of all, they participate in the election of the student governments and the committees of children, so that they know their children are part of a committee. Because of the instruments we have to bring the parents close, we have some instruments about the information of the families, their distance to the school, strengths and talents the parents have, so the teachers can have more information with family cards, with community maps. So there are very simple instruments that promote participation between the school and the community. And not only that, through the learning guides, which are our dialoguing textbooks, anything the child learns is applied to the family and community. So the children are always dialoguing with their parents after each learning guide is a lesson plan that's directed to the children that already know how to read and write, basically. So this immediately brings and strengthens dialogue and interaction between children and their parents for each lesson plan. So this is very important because we don't have to have so many meetings, but parents are involved in the learning process.
Earl wants
and we have to make it simple, no?
Go ahead. Were you going to say some more, Vicky?
No. This is what I just mentioned. Unless you need more explanation about the parents' part.
Earl wants to know, what is the relationship between your NGO and the government? Are you funded by the government?
We give technical assistance. No, we're not. We give technical assistance to governments or to organizations, private organizations. So they hire us. They hire us so that we can do the training, and they hire us so we can also provide the learning materials. So let's say we have been self-financed as a nonprofit because we provide our materials. So for example, the government of the state of Antioquia, capital Medellin, they bought all the materials for all their schools, for the rural schools. So we don't have a direct funding from the government, but the government and the different local governments hire us. Just as Vietnam hired us, just as the government of Puebla hired us. So we offer our technical assistance to government, but we're not financed directly by them. It's through our technical assistance. And by the way, I wanted to mention something that I think is crucial. It's just that Escuela Nueva's ideas are not new in philosophy. What is new is the way we put it in such a simple and viable way that any teacher without having a PhD could do it. And this is, I think, the essence of Escuela Nueva is that it's easily replicated. And by the way, this can be also done in a developed country, because these ideas are not new. So we can also do it in developed countries, and this is a challenge we have, hopefully, for next year.
Omer wants to know, has this model been implemented in conflict areas where there are social restrictions on interaction between children of different ethnicities?
Oh, yes, totally. It has been developed in conflict areas of Colombia. Of course, precisely in the remote areas of Colombia. Not in the close, let's say, not in the big cities, but in the remote areas. That's where the conflict has taken place. So yes, that's where we started, and precisely this is why we started working more on the social skills, because we thought that the way of learning has an impact on democratic behavior. So yes, we have worked in very, very tough, difficult areas of conflict, and also because of the handling. Because since we started with the rural multi-grade schools that handle diversity, we learned to handle heterogeneity and diversity, because even though Colombia has very different ethnic groups, but they're a minority, they're not a majority as in Mexico or in Guatemala or in Peru or in Ecuador. However, one of the strengths of Escuela Nueva is handling diversity in the classroom, different age groups, different gender issues, and of course ethnicity. Yes? Another question?
Vicky, how much does the curriculum change when moving into another culture?
We have learned to use any curriculum, the national curriculum of any country, because that's the way countries are, and that's the way ministries are, and education systems are. Colombia Colombia developed competencies, national competencies in standard. So most Latin America is doing exactly the same. So we work with the curriculum of any country. What we do is we deliver it in a different way. We modularize that curriculum and introduce it into our learning modules so to facilitate flexibility. So the issue of flexibility is crucial because this is the way that you respect children's different learning rhythms. Not everybody learns the same thing at the same time, and I always want to highlight and compare with the health system. If you bring a doctor from 100 years ago into a hospital today, that doctor is really lost. If you bring a teacher from 100 years ago into a classroom today, the teacher is not so lost because everything has changed except the way of learning. So what we focused was we started with the poorest of the poor schools, remote areas, having the challenge of offering complete access in primary education through the multi-grade schools, and forced us to innovate. But it forced us to deliver in a different way because we had to handle diversity in the classroom. So this, I think, is the essence of Escuela Nueva. We use any national curriculum, but we just deliver it in a different way.
Okay, so I think we're at the end of our questions. Vicky, I'm clapping for you. It's hard to find the clapping icon, but it's underneath the smiley face.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Steve, and I congratulate you you and Lucy and all the team for this extraordinary initiative. And Tomás Chasquel, who's our Colombian fellow here in Colombia, who's been helping out so much. So I want to congratulate you for this wonderful initiative, and I hope that when we start becoming a more global movement, you can be a wonderful partner for us.
Yes, I think there's lots to talk about. Thank you to Vicky Colbert. Thank you to all of those of you who are participating live. Thanks to anybody listening to the recording. We're going to give you a quick break before the next set of sessions starts. There are 5 good sessions starting at the top of the hour. Thanks, everybody. Bye now.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.